Aloha. So I wanted to follow up on a few things. There was one of the songs I forgot, and I forgot the main thing. Hopefully we get to Menorrah. 10-4. I still think the 3 makes me think of 3.1415 2653 8. The fall 79 3.1415 2653 79333 and he doesn't know anymore. I actually know a little bit more. It's not a schlosslied. I forget what they're called. They're called slotskas or something. They have a song that's a praise to Shiva. So it's a prayer. And they do pi to the 1/10th. And they go past 433. They have more digits. So it's an encryption. And it's pi. Pi is the number 80. In ancient Hebrew, in ancient Russian. Some guy in the Middle Ages decided pi is the ratio. So we got to come up with a better word. It's not pi. It's the distance around divided by the distance across. I wish I didn't use the Greek words. How can you be both diameter and diarrhea at the same time? Rhea means flow. In an alternate universe, is that number 3? Is part of the fall that we have 3.14? Why would the Indians not have 3.14 but have 1/10 of that? That's because they're one of the 10 invitees. I have a hard time. You can't say race because of racism. You can't say nation because they're more than a nation. They're a tree or a forest tree, and I would call them the pomegranate. If you look at what I did the other day with Ganga, Ganga in Hebrew means valley and traveler or something. So there's an ancient name tied to them. I call them the Gangas, the Ganges River Valley. So you have a mountain, you have a fresh river, you have a valley as far as gardening, and there's a name, Menorrah, something like that literally means a place to give shade to Buddha under the tree by the river. Nita. Oh my goodness. I think it means smile. Now think about the sound Nita. Nita. Niti would be smile. Niti. Say cheese. You're putting yourself in this smile. So divas are the gods. So Dev is Nita. God smile. I know 3 Nitas. I believe the French names. Okay. The point is, They're pretty high. They want to be number one, but they're number two. So again, the good math comes from that. Alexander the Great conquers Eastern Kingdom. He doesn't conquer the West. I'm sorry, the Western Kingdom, the Vedas. He doesn't conquer the East. He hears about armies and elephants, and his men are like, let's go home. He meets a guru who teaches him about eternal life, and he realizes eternal life may not be a good thing because of his view of command and control. He goes back. Greece has the oracles of Delphi, know thyself. They're run by a bunch of Vedas. And then all of a sudden they get really smart at math, but they invented it. And what drives me crazy with this math is the whole zero notion. These historians that don't understand math. Look at your hand. How do I make the number zero? And some of you may make the circle, but then that makes a circle with like three, and you can make eyes and binoculars. I looked out the window and what did I see? Don't do that in front of certain people. They're going to think you're part of the Illuminati. But I can take those two circles for I looked out the window. I got three little fingers up in the air. And I have kind of eyeglasses. Now take the first two fingers that are pointing up and put them together. Now step back. Now you have an arrow pointing to heaven. And you have a smaller arrow kind of pointing down. And you have two eggs. Could be the phallus. Now think about FedEx and their logo. You have that arrow on the logo. It's ingrained in our psychology because it's just a natural shape. It may be equilateral. It's pretty close. Now rotate your hands inward and take your first and your middle finger and your ring finger, you're connected. So you can make a rhombus and you can make different sizes of the rhombus. The other fingers won't be as nearly a rhombus. They'll be more quadrilateral. So you can teach so much. So now, let's say I'm going to use my thumb to count to 5. Thumb is one. Number 2 is the ring or the pointer finger, the index finger. Number 3 is the middle finger. Number 4, number 5. I just counted to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 6 thumb, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going from the outside of the pinky, 5, 5, and 10. What's 0? Close your fist. It's the letter S or A in sign language. You can't add or subtract without 0. Oh, they didn't write it down. Well, they kind of had a space, it looks like, for the 0. Oh, they understood place values and decimal system. Of course they did. You can't add and subtract without a 0. And if you don't understand the maths behind that, you should not be part of the conversation. The same thing with 1. You can't multiply and divide without the concept of 1. This is the basis of an algebra. They were adding, subtracting. They knew about 0. If you divide by 0, you have infinity. Abraham, you shall have children like the stars in the 7 heavens and seas. Archimedes, after meeting the Gangans, figured out the law of large numbers. Archimedes figured out that the volume of a sphere is equal to the volume of a cylinder plus the volume of a cone with the same radius, half the distance across the circle. And in the story of Yeshua, where's all this innovation? We have a lot more innovation than that. He created a library called Alexandria, this so-called Alexander the Great. He created a lighthouse with a pharos, and it had some sort of metal spoon-like shape that the Indian or the Chinese invented and gave to them. What? Chinese gave Alexander the Great in 200 BC? Where's that in the story now? I really question the Pompeii 87 AD, the fall of the temple 70 AD. They never sacrificed again after they killed Yeshua. I don't think they ever sacrificed again. The temple was rent. They claimed they went up to 70 AD and then didn't do it.
They claimed the 70 AD thing was about the wrong man being invited to a dinner. So I think of Yeshua and Matthew, the publican, and he's having dinner there. If you just kind of shake the box and blur the story, you have a story there. You're telling me the most sophisticated nation on earth, the Romans, have only 10 months in the year? They didn't have names for 2 of the months until 100 AD. Oh, by the way, they had an 8 or 9 day week at the time. Belial, to blot out, to erase out of shame. Maybe those 2 months that are missing were the 2 months of torture. I think there was 30 days of torture, or 30 days of kind of imprisonment. So, look at the story of Joseph in Egypt. My O isn't working. He was in jail. The Nephites, I don't like Nephites, I don't like the sound of that. The people of Nephi, Amenadith, my beloved people. I don't know if I can say So that's how you should spell something. If you could mark it to the end of the word, but you wouldn't have to do that
if there wasn't any confusion about what the possibility would be. What is the longhouse? The longhouse of the temple is where all these animals were. It's where the changing tables were. It was right above what we would call the wailing wall. It was a den of thieves in my father's house, as he said. This wasn't... Okay, so we have if it's his father's house, how is he Jehovah? So we have the temple of Jehovah that Solomon builded. We could equally say we had the temple of Jehovah that Nephi builded. And then we have Herod's temple. Well, we have some attempted restoration. We don't have a name with the restoration after Daniel and the return of the exile. And then we have Herod's temple. Herod raised the temple on slabs of stone. The mason, not mason. Uncut stone. You build my house on uncut stone. There was a threshing floor. That's where David built his tabernacle. We've found it. You can see the shapes. You've got the compass shape there. You can find it in YouTube. So when in his life was Yeshua incarcerated in jail, which seems to be a common theme for his prophets? When did he experience that? He experienced all things. So in my scenario, you have 30 plus 7. You have a month. Maybe they waited until the very end of the Passover, but then they took over the main worship area of the Passover, or of the so you want to torture someone, you don't want them to die. And if you've killed 5,000 people before, you know how to prolong life. The other song that I was thinking of earlier that you'll never be able to think about again is Five Golden Rings. On the pillars, they this was a barbecue, so they had some way to make it very efficient. And they had golden rings that they talk about. They could have been brass rings, but they would tie it to the different parts of the animal. Remember, they don't eat the head, they just cut its throat. So you would put a ring around its neck, and at the very end, you would behead it, and one of the rings would go around the neck. Are there any Indian tribes in America or Africa that would put elongated rings around their neck? You would put shackles on their feet to separate the hind legs, and I guess the right side was what the priests kept, and the left side went back to the family at this barbecue. The guy that's studying at Shiloh that found that curse book, the little metal plate curse book, he would know more about that than I could ever. So you got 5 golden rings. You're going to make a mockery out of their sacrifice. It's your opus. You're the executioner. You've crucified 5,000 people, and this is your opus. 5 golden rings. There's this 1970s, early 80s, maybe probably 70s, about this white man that joins an Indian tribe and gets captured by his enemies. They hang him on a pole. They don't impale him. So impale him would just stick him through the anus on a pole. And they stick these wooden stakes through his 2 breasts. And then they rip his flesh open so his breasts are slightly bleeding. So it's not going to kill you, but it's going to create a scar. They're Mormons in their holy little garments. What? They have their 5 points of fellowship? 5 golden rings? The answer is always 5. When in doubt, look at your hand. So, I think they did something. So they have to skin the animal. I had a Muslim neighbor once. He killed a lion in front of me. So you have to skin the animal. You have to desanguinate it. So if you're hanging upside down and you get your throat cut and water comes out, that's going to surprise even the executioner. He's probably done it 100 times. That's going to surprise the executioner. I was looking up the letter M, because remember, M is this mass. So we have the XT mass. You will never see Christmas the same. XT mass. So the X is off, and the cross, and the mass is men. Oh, Christmas tree, you will never see the same again. The letter M, mem. What number is it? 40 days. The mass of torture for about 40 days. He could have lived to 70. I don't know how old he was. There's so much. Once you realize you're living a lie, the mem in the Tarot is associated with the hanged man. What? And look at how his leg is formed. His hands aren't tied behind his back. They nail a piece of wood, he was a carpenter's son, through the right palm and through the left ulnar, or whatever this wrist is. And so his hands were above his head when he was upside down. He could move his arms. But I think with these rings, So now he's got two rings on his breast. And at some point, what he saw and what he had to experience caused him to rip his own flesh out. At some point, he possibly ripped the flesh off of his hand because of what they were making him do. Okay, are we getting to the point of, oh, that's worse than being tortured for 4 hours? 5 golden rings. So this barbecue has a little theater to it. It's a little theatrical event of some sort. And I just think about how the Mormons represent the hypocrisy, but their hypocrisy is clues. So I think he and a group of people were in a garden with a longhouse, and they made the most of it for 30 days, being tortured. Maybe one of them would go. Maybe this was all downfall. And if you get into that, and they would, play "Ring Around the Rosie," "Pocket Full of Posy," "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. We're all gonna die." Then they'd sing the next verse, "We're all gonna get resurrected." Again, there's some interesting motifs in ancient English songs that try to make light of something that was very, very dark, trying to make it light. So let's see if the Mormons ever did community gardens. Oh, they did that. They got rid of those. Those weren't very important. Community gardens. What else did the Mormons used to do but not do anymore that was probably tied to this idea of Zion? Zion is the longhouse. Community gardens. Oh, linger longers and the road show. So remember, it's this big festival, this festival to celebrate Esther prostituting herself to save Israel. Okay, you can put a better language on what I just said, but that's what it is. And it's tied somehow to Carnival. We got this Lent thing that the Catholics do that's 40 days long. I think the Catholics know some of this. They just don't either understand it or they're afraid of it or they participated somehow. I can't imagine them participating. It was so bad, Belial. Everyone tried to cover it up. To this day, the Jewish faith does not sacrifice animals anymore. Men on the cross. So I'm going to talk about Menorrah. So anyway, where would his 5 rings be? He would have shackles on his legs, and at some point they could have. I think at some point he was part of a wheel with some of the other participants, and they did have nails possibly in his knee to connect him to the knee of a woman. Think of the other. What is that woman thing? Not the gunny sack race, but what is that called when you have to try to run as a couple where you don't have a belt or something connecting the legs? I don't know. And when I say he was upside down, they had some sort of rigging system. He was on a tree. They could move him right side up, upside down. They could put him in a situation where they could manipulate a lot of his body. And so he was in sort of a stockade, but it was a hanging stockade. So he could be right side up at times. And remember, the temple had these cross beams out of pomegranate or whatever. They had these rings to move the meat along. And they didn't eat the anus. They didn't eat the head. And they had to prepare the meat to kind of desanguinate it and salt it somehow. And at birth, but they also do that with the children. They wash them with water and salt them. And I don't think they use Dead Sea salt. You're going to salt your child with Dead Sea salt from Sodom and Gomorrah. So when Joseph Smith says the Levites will offer a sacrifice in righteousness again, I think that's this final operation. That's what we're calling the millennial and D-Day and all of that. Isaiah chapter 5. I put together a vineyard. I'm going to go and work one last time in the vineyard. All of this is to save Judah. All of this is to save Judah. And if Judah and the Levites and those that killed their Messiah on a tree in a very vicious way, and the Jehovah's Witnesses got it right, there's an impellation going on here. If you're good at what you do, you could, and a doctor could prove me wrong on this, you could stick a skewer in the anus and have it come out the mouth. Or right below the mouth, you could make an incision so it could come out below the tongue, and the man could be alive. Remember, he shall be mute like a lamb. There are Indian tribes that will take their lip and build this big kind of ring-like thing on their lip. They're doing it to honor what had happened to him, and they didn't even know it. Well, I think they knew of a story. Look at these women that had these long gold rings around their necks to extend and lengthen their. You look at some of the Native American Indian dances. They tinkle as they go, and this is what I learned between these videos. So somehow in this process, they have to cut the spine out of the animal, because in Hebrew culture, you do not eat the spine and the nervous system. And remember, you don't eat the tail. So if you were very efficient at this, somehow you're skinning the animal, and the animal could still be alive after it was skinned, possibly. And you've got this efficiency thing going on. And then at the very end, the tail, with that part of the meat that's bad, the spine and the head all gets separated and gets thrown to the dogs. Remember what Yeshua talked about throwing meat to the dogs. And then all of a sudden there's two cuts. There's a cut one way, there's a cut the other way, the cross, the two cuts. It falls down. The people aren't eating with knives. They've got a spoon, maybe. They've got possibly a butter type knife for dealing with milk, cheese, butter on their bread. They don't have forks. They may have a spoon. So the ritual things you would take to the temple, it's found there related to some of the scriptures, because the men and women melted them down and turned them into sex toys of some sort, like dildos or something. And so you had certain things you would take to the temple, and you probably had a bowl. This big basin with water was part of the process somehow, because they would boil the meat and then barbecue it. Barbecue is probably correct, because that's what all the seasonings for. And if you wanted to make it bitter, you'd put a certain spice on it. So anyway, at the very end, you've got this kind of aha moment when the animal gets cut into quarters, and sideways it gets cut at the fifth rib. And I don't know that they're going to cut through rib. I think the fifth rib means the gut. So you get the belly. So whoever gets the hind leg gets the belly fat and the meat from the belly. Whoever gets the front leg gets the rib cage, the ribs, and I think the heart is still there. I think the liver is still there. So the liver would go with the kidneys are gone. So think about Adam and Eve. If you didn't have to urinate or defecate,
You don't need kidneys. You don't need intestines or stomach. So anyway, it would fall into pieces, and the right side went to the priests, and the left side went to the families. But people would. There were certain rules and protocols, and so all that could happen at once. Now imagine you're trying to torture a man, having that knowledge. So the animal was impaled through the anus all the way through the mouth. So could you do that without really harming the man? And you've done thousands of these. Do you know how long a man will live if you cut out his intestines or his kidneys? You're going to know. And so these Romans have seen how the Jews have done this with these animals all the time. And this is their opus. How long can we keep this man alive? And I think he went 7 days. I think that's probably why I don't like it. There's a couple of reasons, and that's what I wanted to talk about. If I get to it, is the number 7. So I've always wondered about this scripture about Isaiah, about 7 women, 1 man. And I think that's what just came to me. So we have 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds. Remember, there are women there. Supposedly John, the beloved, is there. These 4 calling birds are the mothers, or the mothers. Meaning, this is Mary, the mother of Jesus. This is possibly Mary's mother. I'll just put Jean on it. And this is the mother or mothers of his wife or wives. These are the mothers. So we have a Salome mentioned by name. We have a Mary of Egypt mentioned. Something like that. Let's just put 4 names there. 4 calling birds. Somehow these 4 calling birds were part of one of these wheels I'm talking about. And I think their ankles were nailed together in kind of a circle. And I think they were either on the right side or the left side. It really doesn't matter, because if he's upside down and you've got a spoon with the ability to invert direction, where they are doesn't matter. But think about what we do. We call it the left hand. It's the left hand, left behind. It's izquierda. Does that mean not beloved? Because izquierda, querida, or is beloved. So maybe the left side is the beloved side. That would make more sense. And then we use the word right. What are you talking about? Right? Hand? Correct? Right is a bad word. It just... So imagine they're doing something where he's partially influencing how the wheels are spinning and who's going to get tortured next. And there's somehow a rope tied to the back of his hands. Remember, his hands are bound or nailed together in a certain way. And if he can hold up or endure something, it won't spin the wheel, but eventually, his upper body strength weakens out and he can't hold on, and it spins the wheel. Now imagine him shouting, left, left, not left. So not left, so your fingers and your thumb in the form of an L on your forehead. There are people that are somewhat dyslexic and they have to hold up their fingers to figure out which hand is their left hand. And if they're dyslexic, I think it's a little bit odd that they would do that, because they're both the same shape. But they figure out which is their left hand because it makes the L, and they've kind of figured out that that's what an L looks like. The inversion of an L is a not L. Not L. Not L. No L. Interesting. Got 4 calling birds, 3 firm stands. The bottom which was currently, I'm still
figuring out if Johanna was Magdalene. So this is clearly Mary and Martha, sisters. And Jesus wept one time. He looked at Mary because Lazarus had died, and he wept. And then I'm going to say Magdalene is traveling to the turtle dove was Tor. We looked up that in the last video. That actually means bark. These are his two sons. And one partridge and a pear tree. Pear tree. Who's named it? You go back and read Isaiah. So he was naked. So these women cover his nakedness. They create a circle around him. So the Romans probably make the women naked too. Probably put them up in the tree. Probably start to create some sex swing to force all these men and these women to engage in things that they wouldn't want to do. All the vile things that you see in pornography. Vile. The vile stuff you see in pornography is not vile. This was vile. What they were doing. And if there was 30 days of some torture going on, you've got to make it as much of your parents. And, I'm saying there's probably more than just these people. But this was the core unit. This was there it is. Now count. I don't think the 5 golden rings is 5 people. So we have 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. No. It cannot be. Are there 10 apostles? And does apostle not mean only the kings? So, have you ever heard of the Colombian necktie? I think they did that in front of Yeshua with his son. And they did it as a mockery. La Familia Sagrada. And I think a lot about like, how do I know this? Like, how is this coming to me? And I think what's happening is as you tune into a radio station, you're going to get more glimpses of the truth. But you got to circle through all the data, filter it, and you're going to get more of the truth. But then there are times I'll put on the hat of, was I one of the Roman executioners? But if this idea of love and knowledge permeates through the universe, this story is how mercy overcame justice. It got so bad that Mother Earth shook. And finally, the watchers said, it is enough. And the Father in heaven had to stop crying and said, finally. And his son could then give up the ghost. They were paying a blood price because some of those watchers broke the rules, maybe bent the rules, brought some seed to the earth, the daughters of men and the sons of God, or the daughters of God and the sons of men, created some children. Look at the story of Ganga. Brahma gave her permission. She had to kill all of her sons. Drown them in the river. She killed 7. The mortal man stopped her from killing the 8th, and he was allowed to live according to Brahma rules. Water killing sons. The Great Flood. How many innocent people were killed? The price had to be paid. Well, technically, if they didn't show up uninvited, seven sisters, the Palladians, and they may have been invited. I may, and if so, I'm wrong, and I apologize to them. The Chemas, the seven women tinkle as they go. Look at the dances that they did in South America. The women would put these little trinkets on their ankles, and they would go around and they would do these tinkling dances. In ancient Egypt, they would do the same thing with clappers. And they're naked as the days they were born, every one of them. So if you look at who he's surrounded with, I'm doing the count here. 2 out of the 8 are boys. 3 out of the 8 are women. I'm sorry, 2 out of the 10. There's only 2 boys. The 2 bullocks, the 2 Taurs. Remember, Taur in Aramaic meant bullock. Later, somehow, it got changed. So think about language. If you want to blot this out, you're going to somehow blot out there's no chickens, there's no ducks, there's no geese. So I think the partridge and the turtle doves, I think at some point they were, but maybe, they would sacrifice young bullocks. If you look at the Old Testament, it's all there. But then if you read Isaiah, you're going to start to see, read this, 7 women take hold of 1 man. So I think at some point as Isaiah would try to tune in, it got clearer and clearer. And how did he die? In one of those ways. Very interesting. And it was done so this never happens again. And by never happens again, I don't mean in our little planet or our solar system or our universe. I mean in the cosmos, which represents all the multiverses of our universe going through this Mobius strip of time, looping back. So it's our universe in a multiverse form, plus all of the universes that exist. This will never happen again. Something is going to change, not in this earthly realm with the earthly rules, but with the eternal rules of mercy, love, and justice. Because what happened here was a lesson to be learned once and never again. And that's why it will be celebrated, and earth will be the temple garden restored. Because it will change these rules so that the watchers can't violate part of the rules, and then so this is a conflict of interest. If you're the watchers and you're supposed to be watching, and you're kind of the judges, and you go and violate the rules. That was
the Wicked One was so smart. He got them all involved. He first went out and procreated with and seeded himself because he knew when he got caught, he was going to get castrated. No, emasculated. And he did. And guess who did it? The children of Ganga. You read the story of Brahma and Brahma, the 3 gods, and their wives, put all these weapons together, and it says they defeated the Wicked One. And I think they castrated. So he knew what was coming. He was going to get castrated. But his strategy was genius. You then invite all these watchers who are non-invitees to Earth to come and start to play in the playground, and you have chaos. You have Charlie Foxtrot. And it has to be restored. You have to recover. And you have to recover for that one vine. The ox cross mem. Noel. The first Noel. Oh, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree. So just think about Johnny Depp movies where you have all these dead bodies hanging from something. Now imagine it all being hanging from the same tree. And some of the people are still alive. Some heads are in orbs. You should think about having a Christmas tree. Okay, so now, is it 10 apostles? Well, there's 12 months in a year. There's 7 days in a week. So this is us using our logic. There were 12 tribes of Israel. If I had to blame 2 of the tribes, that would be Judah and Levi. 10 tribes. Um, so the numbers just need to be challenged. There's clear evidence that the numbers were manipulated by the Masoretics at some point.
Maybe not them. Maybe they were just trying to preserve what they could, but this is 1,000 years later. So let's look at. I think I'm gonna have to go here.
I'll hand this guy this is the side guru. Side guru. Side. Creating a foundation called establishment. There's a story of Yeshua visiting and teaching during the time. And he was teaching them about hypocrisy, subscriptions. It's this guy, this Nathan guy.
So in this video, he really goes after. You have 2 or 3 witnesses with a different timeline, meaning different texts, earlier texts, and and look at this. Shem was 100, had a child. Ariphax was 135, had a child. Some people think Ariphax was taken by Noah away from Shem as a grandson, taken to where we call Jerusalem today, was forced to live an ascetic life and chose to, and he was Melchizedek. Some say Shem was Melchizedek. Look, we have a pattern.
And then all of a sudden they're this much younger. Peleg. Peleg means division or river. But the problem is this is the first stage. Now apply this to a higher level. They've manipulated time. Part of the reason they're manipulating time is to say Shem and Abraham lived at the same time. It's tied to the timing of the flood and Babel. It's got to have a certain population growth so they could make that happen because there were only 8 people. Where does it say that? Well, in Hebrews it says that. Are you sure? 8 can mean divided. The consecrated people. The ones that would listen. The ones that would listen and follow Noah. And then the moment he gets off the boat, he sends forth 70. Oh, no, he has a bunch of children real fast. Peleg was on the boat. I think Peleg occurred right before the flood. So let's just imagine there are righteous people that chose to stay. So let's say Enoch is saying, we're going to do an airlift. Let's say he had the technology that he could get any person from anywhere on the earth off planet. And let's say the Gulf of Mexico is where Atlantis is, and this is where Enoch is building a city. It's got a big column pillar in the middle. At the very end, the pillars are collapsing. A comet strikes the earth right there in the Yucatan Peninsula. There's these big waves. There's all this chaos. and those that are up in the high mountains that survived the flood, look, and the city has fled. Zion has fled. Enoch has fled. And they think it was sunk into the depths of the sea. Okay. So you get everyone off planet. Some people are going to say, we're going to stay and fight. Lord of the Rings, right? We're going to stay and fight. And some of them are experienced. The Gangans know how to. So we're in Operation Charlie Foxtrot. Things have gone sideways. The first great nation, Africa, will be the one that is bombarded the most, but they know how to fight. The second great nation, India, knows how to group together and fight. China might not even be the third great nation, but they ended up being that because they were next to India. So they had this protection geographically. But the promised land, the land to fight over, isn't the Levant. Abraham went there after Noah. You're playing capture the flag. You're going to the enemy territory to take him out. Certainly the Nile was a tree of life. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick. But when the desire comes, it is a tree of life. A tree of life. There were probably 10 trees. That's one reason I think. Go read Daniel. Let's go read Daniel. Ancient of Days. Daniel's in Aramaic. We're not supposed to go read Daniel. Okay. Aramaic. Daniel. You got a third part. Yes. Disagree with the council. You got the council. We're currently. So at that moment, it was Operation Charlie Fox. Chaos. Now we're in Operation Save Them All.
It sounds like a rock and roll song, except backwards. Kill them all. We're in Operation Save Them All. And I don't know how that's going to happen. But that's the mercy of the King of the Most High. Okay, so is it? We have the 7 churches of Revelation. Debate over singular or plural. No, there was at least 10 to 12 churches there. If you read the New Testament, they're missing some of the churches. Why were they removed? The Nicolaitan Church, which is called out for being bad. That could be an inversion. And I'm not even counting Patmos, which is technically not on the country of Asia. Or it's an island. Asia. Island. There's not 7 churches in there. You go back and read the New Testament, and you compare it to Revelation, there's at least 10 to 12 churches there. Seven and the Menorrah. What did I call it? 10-4. How many candles are on the menorah? So, no, the Mormons are going to say, no, Nephi had a dream, and it was the sun, and 12 stars. You don't get it. Nephi had a vision. If you see 10 to 12 people really fast, are you going to know exactly how many there are? If the angel actually explicitly told Nephi there were 12, then I would agree with you. We've got this 12 stars and virgin. Oh, interesting. His paramours could have possibly not been consummated. That would be really interesting. So the menorah, of course the menorah has. Ancient Days, chapter 4. And my African brothers and sisters say this is proof that God the Almighty is black. He may be. I just know the first tree invited to seed this earth. All of our hearts are black because the seed is African. Atikyum. Well, okay. Let's grab you. What does that say?
ותהי כיומין.
Ancient Days. Mm. So you read chapter 7, there's a council, they're sitting around. The Ancient Days has a lot of people attending him. The sun comes in. 3 do not agree. And then you have this vision interpreted. Whatever Daniel was explaining up here, it troubled him. It troubled him. And he talks about the four, and then the eye on the eye or something. So if you ever hear the Almighty All-Father voice, you will know. It is great and terrible. Okay, the Menorrah. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon around Pharaoh. His own house, the house of the forest of Lebanon. Wood goes in the house. You can put stone around it. And you can put stone in your own house. There's the stones there. There's the foundation. So am I reading that wrong? Uncut stone. So there's a story from the Americans, and the guy's making commentary, and he's like, and this is why Abraham's first son was not legitimate, is he took her in lust across an altar of cut
Stone actually says the word cut stone. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't know that I'm reading that correctly or wrong at the moment. But that's the whole point. You learn what you can. The widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali. When I see Naphtali, I think of Naphi. We got Hiram, a worker in brass. I'm pretty sure the mason work inside the temple was metal and outside the temple was stone. So that's not here. An Egyptian mason with an E is, that's it, that's funny. Maliakala, brass. Knocker, nation. We're looking for Menorrah. So I guess let's try candle. Oh, that's why I was here. 7:49. And the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side, 5 on the left, with flowers and lamps and tongs of gold. Candlesticks and lamps, what's what? 5 on the right side, 5 on the left. Is that 5 candlesticks or 5? And if I hear that 5 on the left and 5 on the right, and I believe there were 10 persons surrounding Yeshua, the light in the middle, then that would be 5 men and 5 women, which would make more sense. Look at your hands. I'm saying there's 8 and 2. There's 5 and 5 somehow. No, that can't be right. The menorah has always been the temple menorah. 1, 2, 3. 3 on the right, 3 on the left, 1 in the middle. You're wrong. It can't be like what you just said. It's 7, the creation. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the right. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left. 2 in the middle. An 8-day holiday, not a 7-day holiday. Shamasha, the 9th branch, the helper, which lights the others. Yeah, we're getting closer. So you have to dig into the Old Testament, but somewhere it said.
So you got 5 on the right, 5 on the left. Men sitting on the right side, women sitting on the left side. It shouldn't be real hard to make that connection. But I'm going to say it's 5 plus 5. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm looking at my hand. 5 on the left, the women. 5 on the right, the men. You could actually somehow itsy bitsy spider or some other way connect. You could just do the touchdown thing. You just push your hands like you're pushing up against the wall and connect your thumbs. And then you could see why they went to 9. So now I have 4 on the right, 4 on the left, and the 2 thumbs, if they kind of curve up, kind of become the 9th. So you could see how they could get that from their hands. Plus the 1. And that 1 is the 2 thumbs together. But there's a place in the... Remember Yeshua said there are those either against me or with me, and he kind of changed his motif. He's doing some calculus up in heaven, trying to get the watchers to align, to balance the scale. And when we read Daniel, it says there were clearly 3 that were against. So I'm thinking there were clearly 3 that were for, and that would obviously be Afri, Donga, and China. Those would be the 3 for. And then you would have 3 against. You know, we hear a lot about the king of Tyre. I don't know. Yeah, so who those were. And then we had middle of the fence people. You ever heard of that? And so there is a version of these candlesticks where there's 3 candles on the right, 3 candles on the left, and then down low there's 4 that are kind of making a square. 10 and 4, good buddy. And then separately there's a light that lights the menorah. The reason I wanted to find menorah is I want to find the actual Hebrew and kind of start playing with some of that. Et, with or and. There's menorah. So menorah means candlestick. There's oracle, debir, para, flowers, para near. There's a lot more than near going on there. Menorrah is mean, and the lamp. And why are lamps evoked if this is near? So this is, somehow there's this rule of, it wouldn't be nirim, it would be nirot, which also is plural. Because look at tongs. Tongs is in, but lamps is oath. And is that their masculine and feminine form of singular and plural? Menorrah would be carrying the handles in a loom. Near. To break up the freshly plowed or division. A lamp. Take a listen. It was Menorrah, and it was a message out. Oops. No, they're just going down. Menorrah. 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 And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches out of one side, and 3 branches out of the other side. You got bowls like into almonds. So it looks like there might be 4 bowls in between them that have oil in them. So is it a lamp or is it a candle? And did they have a difference? So I'm not going to dive into the intuition I had before. Could be right, could be wrong. That's the whole point of studying something. Menorrah, I believe that those were with me, those were against me, those were fence riders. But then you've got a bunch of plus ones. And you invited blockage. 10-4, good buddy. 10-4. And remember what Nephi said. Second Nephi chapter 2. And I suppose, and he talks about some stuff about Abraham and Nephi. God loves us. And so I was on a flow. If you read, or if you watch what I did this morning and now, I was on a flow. I'm kind of not on a flow. There's disharmony. I've read at some point this thing about 10. I look at my hands, I see 10. I see 5 on the left, 5 on the right, 5 female, 5 male. I see all of that. At some point I read that the menorah had 5 on the right, 5 on the left. I found that. I believe there was a menorah that had 3 candles up high on the right and on the left. Then it had 4 candles down low in the middle to make a square. And then the external candle would light it. And that external candle would obviously be Yeshua. And so the idea of second Nephi is we're swimming in deep waters. When you read someone's interpretation, you just can't throw it out as, oh, that's correct or that's not correct. You got to understand you're going to a deep place, but the whole idea is everyone is supposing. How do you overcome supposing? 10-4, good buddy. Charlie Foxtrot. you have to have clear language. So we have what are called the philosophies of men, mangled in scripture. And people can read exactly what I'm saying and you're a hypocrite. Right? That's what they would say. You're doing the exact same thing. What I'm trying to do is show evidences that we are missing data. That's really what I'm trying to show. And then, how do we build an axiomatic system to restore truth? So when I give an alternative explanation, I'm not saying it's right. That's not how mathematics works. I'm saying, all I have to do, would you do a counterproof? One piece of evidence. Counterproof. And I think at some point that will come to light, whether it's the Catholics releasing some information, the Mormons releasing some information. We're going to understand that the story of the cross we've been told is the wrong story. I like it as the story of the cross because the cross is a key variable of the story. The cross being the number 10, not being a tree branch. Was he yoked? If he was the ox, of course he was yoked. They had ways to control his body. I think about the Oedipus King Lear component of Zedekiah as well, that they killed Zedekiah they killed Zedekiah's sons in front of him and then put out his eyes. So that was like the last thing he saw. And is that what you would want to do? Or would you want to kill the child in front of the man and then make him stare at his wife for 30 days? I don't think you would put out his eyes if you wanted to. So what I'm doing is I'm showing data, I'm putting it together. You look at the history that we have, and you have to challenge all history. Not just the history you want, you challenge all the history. We do know that there was an earthquake right at the Dead Sea, 31 AD, plus or minus 5 years. You can find that. We do know Pompeii happened, and they're telling us it was 87-ish. We do know the temple was destroyed 70-ish. We do know there was some story of 5,000 being crucified in about 4 BC, Herod's death. Well, so if you look at it or you shake the box, it's like, why would they leave that information? There's something there. It's not necessarily the time right, the number right, or anything. We do know that we have very little knowledge about this temple destruction, but we do know that there were hundreds that fled to a high mountain top. It took the Romans some time to conquer them, and maybe they burned them. Maybe burned themselves alive. We know that Joseph has very interesting stories about himself being in a cave with sword suicide, but he survives, and someone gets their head cut off. And we also have another story of his friends being on the cross, being crucified, and he begs and they take him down and save him. Okay, so that's what we know just in that time window. But then we have, what do we know about Josiah? What was going on with the Asherah tree? And the Queen Mother of Heaven? And then we have Nephi. What was going on in America? And then somehow the Germans get data from America, and they decide they're going to go all Nazi on someone. You get back from America, all of a sudden Europe is smart at math again. This is the time of Galileo, his predecessor Copernicus, his predecessor Mr. Triangles, I forget his name. And then, after they finally conquer the heart of Africa, Timbuktu, then Europe gets really smart at math. All of a sudden, Leibniz and Newton simultaneously invent calculus. It's like these stories about how coffee was invented 800 AD. There's a plant growing. People didn't gnaw on it and say, oh, that stimulated me until 800 AD. Or even the coca leaf, right? The coca leaf of the South. And so you have 5 people that could solve what was called the Brachistone problem. Leibniz created fluxions to solve it in Germany. Newton had some information and created what we call calculus, or likely he was standing on the shoulders of giants. So Robert Hooke in the basement probably did the work, and Newton took credit for it. Tells you what I think of Newton. So, Newton backwards, not when. Newton, not new. Just do not on the first word backwards. Newton, not new. None of what he did was new. Then you had the brothers, the Bernoulli brothers. They were up in St. Petersburg, Russia, because somehow the Russians got some, and we do know that the Russians got some of these math people from Timbuktu. And all of a sudden, you've got 5 people in Europe that can solve this problem. Oh, we just got smart at math. No, you didn't. Number 1, the first shall be last. Africa is the great nation. That's why they, throughout the history of man, have always been put down. Because they are the first tree. They're the tree that began all life on this earth. The Lion King tree, what is that called? You look it up, the meaning that we give that tree means Indian shipmen, people from Ganga, are resting in the shade under that tree. They're traveling to Africa all the time. Number 1 and number 2 are communicating all the time. Because they're not afraid of Charlie Foxtrot. We're in this different operation. They're experienced. They're number 1 and number 2 for a reason. They're preparing the way for the final victory. And number 1 has all the higher knowledge. They have the grandfather knowledge. Number 2 is kind of like the apprentice. They're close to number 1. They can learn from number 1. Remember what Abraham said. You line anyone up, you can put them in order. Rank order. There's an order to things. And so if you're in a battle on this earth, who are you going to go after the hardest? You're going to go after number 1. The last was a young vine, Isaiah chapter 5. A vine is not a tree. A vine is just learning. So it's going to go and interface with all these trees in this beautiful garden and learn about life. But in a life without war, because it's a young tree. You all of a sudden took this level 1 player, this young tree, and you threw it into this level 99 chaos. And so you have to figure out a way to make a correction. This was a great wicked play that's continuing. And by play, I mean a move of the wicked one. So the history of this world is a history of trying to put down the black man because he's important. And, you could say number 2 if you wanted, I'm talking about trees. If you wanted to give a tree to Africa, I think of that tree of Lion King, that big whatever tree, but, we also just think of ebony, what a hard wood. When you think of a tree of India, I'm going to go with the pomegranate. They're not large anymore. They were large enough to make beams and pillars for a temple at one point. So this is a truth. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. The highest mathematics came from number 1. The second highest mathematics came from number 2. The white man just took credit for all of that. So this metaphor of being a vineyard and a tree, in the Old Testament, it talks about a vine grows better when it's supported by a tree. So you got support. The trees that are large, you can still have some issues. You get more shade, and you obviously get vino from a vine, from the vine. The vine can grow into a tree. And then we have this olive tree, which may or may not be that because we're in Charlie Foxtrot, Abraham was called up to be a tree on this earth as part of this battle. So now think about capture the flag. If the Americas is your promised land, and by Americas I could maybe say Americas in Africa. I'm not pinpointing that. The Isles of the Sea, and then you're going to war. What you would do is you'd get all the innocents off planet that wanted to leave. Enoch, that was his job. You would send forth an attacking group, Noah, to go to the heart of the beast to destroy the beast, to go to its heart. The heart is the Levant. There was a megalithic structure where the Weeping Wall was. People are saying Herod put that megalithic structure there. The Western Wall was built, I believe, on top of that existing stone. It was too big, I think, for us even in modern times to move. Give me a lever big enough and I can move the world. Possible. When Yeshua was alive, that Western Wall apparently wasn't finished. And so you could see that the temple was built up on a platform. I think they raised the temple. I think they actually say that when they talk about Herod's temple. So I believe Solomon's temple was built on the bedrock. I believe on the bedrock, it was a temple of wood, and on the outskirts of the temple were cut stone. And I believe that was part of the teaching lesson. Uncut stone. A wise man builds his house upon a rock. Okay, so anyway, the idea is if we live in a world of lies, we need an axiomatic system to restore truth. So, times and seasons, I've proposed a 5, 25, 500, 5. Think about what I just said. Look at my hands. You can teach about multiplication. You just need 5 by 5 blocks. You can teach about largeness of numbers. 25 times 20 is 500. 5 times 100 is 500. You only get extra days. You're not adding and subtracting sometimes. You're only adding. So in calculus, this is called a non-sinusoidal asymptotic bound. A sinusoid kind of oscillates around the truth and gets to it. An asymptote is on one side or the other side of the truth and is going towards it. So how hard is it to just focus on your hands and say the answer is 5 and then build times and seasons around them? And then if you look at the history, ancient Chinese had a 360-day calendar with extra days. The ancient Egyptians, and by ancient Egyptians, they're coming from the South Nile. They're coming from the mountains of Africa, the Nubians or whatever, or the Amharics. So then when you're dealing with all this other noise, you have to ask yourself, how could that story have been created? And what is the truth in the story? And so this is the idea of a stereogram, where you shake the box, you look at the picture, you shake the box, and what you're trying to do is put a puzzle together. And this is linear algebra. We have enough variables and enough unknowns. that we can start putting the puzzle together. But you have to be able to anchor to some truth. Time is an easy anchor. Place is an easy anchor. So you anchor to time and place. So in terms of time and place, you either go with Giza or Serpent Mountain as the place, and you update longitude. Anyway, I think it's 10 o'clock. I think I'm just going to call it. The idea is we need to waste and wear out our lie to bring the truth out of the darkness. That means the truth is in the darkness. We have to shine a light. We have to step forward with faith, shine a light, and things will start to illuminate and to be brought together. Aloha.